There are only three things I would like to mention. First, I want to thank Lawndale for this opportunity, which was generously granted to me for the past 4 months. Today we celebrate the closing. I personally thank Walker, Executive Director of the Lawndale Art Center, Jeremy Johnson, Operation and Exhibition Manager, and the entire wonderful team that makes this magnificent institution in Houston special. This year marks their 51st anniversary, and I hope they celebrate at least another 100 years. Thank you for the support and trust you place in us by hosting this event. And allow me this space and speak and share. I thank my husband, Justino, and partner, and my U.S. American family, my parents. I certainly appreciate the presence of everyone here, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Today, I especially thank For Palestine, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and Solidarity for Palestine in Houston, who bring important reflection to share with us. Certainly, they will be better speakers than me. Second, today, in December 20th, as far for our brightest star, tomorrow we will be the winter solstice in Northern Hemisphere. I can foresee that this winter will be colder and more terrible for many who had already suffered so much. I wanted to share something personal related to sovereignty that this sculpture represents. A short story. I grew up in Buenos Aires, a grid pattern city with a large obelisk on 9 de Julio Avenue. Later, at age 12, I first saw the majestic Andes mountains while living in Santiago, Chile. Thus, my spatial orientation has always been shaped by looking at this landscape. In Houston, I felt lost, crisscrossed by highways, entrances, and exits, and complete lack of pedestrian culture. These mountains emerged as a desperate protest against this Houstonian landscape, but it is also part of an emotional memory, an evocation. Following my personal story, my family has been shaped by fascist violence, executions, persecution, disappearances, exiles, and torture characteristic of the 1970s. They were dangerous years for millions of Latin Americans. However, despite the pain, my parents resisted. Some of my family did not. I am telling you this to say I have lived recognizing lists of names, lists of disappeared, lists of executed, lists of exiled. Their names sometimes inscribed on stones or memorials. This aesthetic of names, faceless, without history, is what remains of the life violated by fascist violence. This aesthetic legacy becomes an ethical certainty that tells me not to forget, and never again, never for anyone. Today, in this poignant mountain range, I have titled Sovereignty, the arrival of winter transformed it into a majestic white monument, painted with snow. Today, I have included lists, terrible ones. Despite any hardship I've been here, I have a life to tell, but this list of my mountain are the names of Palestinian children who didn't live past the age of 5. There are many thousands of them. Third, I will finish. I confess I am not good with words. I thought that to summarize, I will share a poem by Vicente Cito Lema, a very well-known Argentine activist. I will read first in Spanish, hoping the English translation will be somewhat kind. El principio de la muerte es el olvido de la vida. El arte trae el mañana, crea con el sueño, la materia. La muerte no sirve para la vida, la muerte es apenas muerte. Pobrecita la vida ante tanta muerte, que el arte no cubra con belleza el olvido de la vida. La materia del arte es el recuerdo. El sentido del recuerdo es provocar la belleza de la vida. The beginning of death is the forgetting of life. Art brings tomorrow, creates matter with dreams. Death is useless for life. Death is merely death. Pour life in the face of so much death. May art not cover with beauty the forgetting of life. The subject matter of art is memory. The purpose of memory is to evoke the beauty of life. Thank you. I leave this microphone at your who would like to?
Hi everybody, my name is Astra and I'm a member of For Palestine Houston. We want to thank Mariela for having us here today and commend her hard work and dedication to being our leader of our Houston community and sparking this important conversation. We've been asked here today to speak on sovereignty, which has so many intricacies and beautiful histories. As queer people, our identities are all-encompassing, belonging to no nation or land, born from everywhere and infinitely resurfacing, which means that if every queer person were to die today, all across the world, another one would be born tomorrow. We are integrated into communities, and as vulnerable members of those communities, deserve rights and protections such as any other person on this land. We are also recognized that we are constantly thrown to the margins of our own imperialist empire here in the global West, literally and historically left for dead. Our community is littered with the remnants of perpetual injustice, devastating losses that we have not recovered from today. As we mourn the lives taken from us throughout history, we witness the strategic removal of trans rights under the current administration, Senate Bill 8, and more backroom bills resulting in higher risk of assault for trans people, youth, Black and Black trans people as well, who are already under immense pressure and debt. Hiring new pieces of legislation almost feels daunting, but that's how the U.S. empire wants it to be. They want us to see ourselves as disposable, unimportant, and they will take every chance to snuff us out. But in light of our community's situations, we also recognize the ongoing genocide faced by our Palestinian friends on the other side of the world, and we want to outline the stages of genocide and how they manifest. We have classification, symbolization, dehumanization, polarization, which is where trans people are at in the United States, persecution, extermination, and denial. From one side of the world to another, we can see the future and the past, and we know that our struggles are not just interconnected, but one and the same. As we continue to fight for our liberation and Palestinian liberation, and it is incredibly important that those fights are one and united. But in our existence as an organization, we have also been posed the question of homophobia and transphobia coming from the Arab community. And how can we, as queer people, support a community who's hostile to us? I'm happy to debunk that as a queer Arab myself, that we do not have those hostilities within our community. We affirm that queerness belongs to, again, no nation or land, and we are found in every corner of the earth, and Palestine is no different. queer Palestinians themselves exist and are fighting for rights in their own country. But in this case, it's no different than others. Palestinian and Arab and queer fights are one and the same, once again. In our country, we're seeing a sudden exodus of queer people fleeing from their cities and their families. And so we pose a different question. How can we justify the oppression and subjugation of Palestinians by further alienating the LGBT community? When our community flees, they are met with sympathy and resources from other allies. When Palestinians fight for their lives and their rights in their home country, the reaction from these same allies should not be to justify the genocide of Palestinians via our own government policies and funding. We have a responsibility towards the harm done by our empire across the world. We've seen the imperial core utilize our queerness against Palestinians, using us as a prop to defend Israel's invasion of stolen Palestinian land. It's a PR boost for a Holocaust. The method is called pinkwashing, which Israel promotes queer friendliness and markets their country as a safe haven for gays. It's quite the opposite, actually. While also painting Palestinians and Muslims as barbaric and violently against queer rights. This promotion is nothing more than a marketing scheme to bolster the public image of Israel. But we will not fall for these obvious tactics. We recognize that it is impossible to separate our suffering from within the empire from suffering caused by our oppressors worldwide. We recognize that we are all subjugated by the same imperial powers, and we should hold no loyalty to a government that will not hesitate to kill us as they kill indiscriminately across the planet. Our sovereignty is not separate from theirs. Our existence is ever present, and not one country nor power can extinguish that flame. And so sovereignty to us means dreaming of a world where everybody can walk freely, live freely, experience joy, where we look to the future and we don't see our endless suffering and subjugation from imperialism, where we see healing, growth, and justice to all the oppressed. This is what sovereignty looks like to us, where our paths are destined to lead us. These dark times are not forever, and we must remember that we are infinitely stronger than those who oppress us. We have nothing to lose but our chains, and because our birthright to freedom and sovereignty are stronger than the weak will to oppress. And so we say, as always, free Palestine, free Congo, free Sudan, and may we see liberation within our lifetime, inshallah. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I guess first, thank you for having us out here. Really appreciate it. This is a beautiful sculpture and very meaningful sculpture. My name is Trey. I'm in two organizations. Palestine Solidarity. We've been around since October 23. We focus primarily on direct action community outreach. And so we met at Anarcho Fest a few weeks ago, where we were tabling for our Houston arms embargo. The Houston arms embargo, let's get this part out of the way real quick. The Houston arms embargo, it's our campaign to stop weapon shipments for Israel through the port of Houston. There's an international shipping company, Amidst, who Israel uses to ship, arms, weapons, goods, well, up until they stop the goods, but more specifically, the wings of F-35 jet parts that are used to bomb schools, hospitals, tent camps, and other communities in Palestine. These wings are, taken off of jets, put on boats, shipped through the port of Houston, where they're then taken to Fort Worth via train, so they could be repaired, fixed up, and put back on jets that are flown straight to occupied Palestine. So, we see it, our role is very important in stopping, right, the shipment of arms going through our port. And so with the campaign, we're trying to reach, everyone, right? We see the campaign as something that links all movements, whether it's the environment, whether it's, if you just want better parks in your city, right? This is something that links us all together, right? To kind of zoom back and take a take a broader perspective of it, right? You know, the United States, right, is very much complicit in the genocide of Palestinians, right? You can take it a step further and say, you know, they are causing the genocide, right? They're the reason for the genocide. U.S. imperialism, right? You know, the United States seeking to dominate the world through its economy, you know, dominating the resources of the world, right? You know, it will stop, or it will not stop, right? For anything, right? To achieve its goal. And this is a project that started way back in, you know, 1619, right? You know, was in the last election, right? A lot of people were talking about Project 2025. But if you're really thinking about it, since the first settlers came to Turtle Island in 1619, right? You know, this U.S. project has been, you know, about genocide, about, you know, stealing land, stealing resources from the very beginning. So of course, once you conquer the, you know, not just, you know, from the east to the west, but, you know, you spread to the Americas, right? And then you spread overseas. We see what's happening in Venezuela right now with the U.S. military, you know, taking tankers, right? Oil tankers from Venezuela, putting thousands of Marines on the island of Puerto Rico. You know, calling Maduro a terrorist and a drug dealer, putting you know, millions of dollars bounty on his head, and for what, right? For exercising, you know, their own right as a nation, right, to control their land and their resources. And so, right, the art of peace, right, the sovereignty, right, that's what sovereignty is all about. Have control over your land, your resources, and your destiny. So what right does the U.S. have, right, to determine, you know, what should be going on in another country, in another land that's not theirs, right? Or even here, when we, you know, of course, bring it back to the United States, you know, the United States is still, you know, you can call it 50 states, but it's still one big colony, you know. It's still Turtle Island, right? There's still indigenous people here on the land. We're still in occupied territory. Right? When we think about like occupied territory, we could look at Palestine. You know, Israel is a white, you know, colonial, racist settler state, right? It's been that way from the jump. You know what I'm saying? And so when we talk about like sovereignty in terms of Palestine, well, it's Palestinians has every right for sovereignty over their own land, you know? And that means, you know, resistance, right, when necessary. The names on this sculpture here, right, are children who are killed by the IDF, right, the so-called Israeli Defense Force, or IOF, right, the occupation force. You know, there's infants, you know, children to age 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Which is, you know, you kind of take it in. Earlier I was like looking at, you know, trying to read as many names as I can. Yeah, it's real heavy, you know. But to bring it back, when we talk about resistance, right, you know, the importance of resistance, you can look at these names and you can the number of children that the IOF has killed, right? You can see the importance of resistance. You know, the IOF, you know, they call it a war, right? But really it's a war on children, because IOF recognizes that, okay, if we can crush the next generation of resistance fighters, it's going to be that much easier to steal and occupy the land. It's going to be that much easier for us to you know, basically, you know, stop the Palestinians from exercising sovereignty on their own land. And so that's why it's important for us, you know, especially here in the United States, to, you know, stand in solidarity with Palestinians, but also to fight in our own way, right? Whether it's something like the arms embargo, whether it's supporting, you know, political prisoners who are on hunger strike right now in the UK, taking direct action against these weapons manufacturers, boycotting these companies on the BDS list, right? These are all just, you know, some ways we can, right, you know, fight back against, you know, the Israeli occupation, but also United States imperialism. I mentioned earlier I'm in another organization I'm in, right? The All African People's Revolutionary Party. We're a Pan-African organization, for those who don't know. Pan-Africanism is our goal, our political objective, is the unification of the continent of Africa under scientific socialism, right? And as Pan-Africans, right, we've recognized the importance of supporting Palestinian resistance, you know, ever since the organization itself has been around since, you know, 1968. Anywho, So, Africans in Africa has a long history of supporting the Palestinian struggle because, right, when we look at the continent of Africa, for hundreds of years, right, we've suffered from the colonialization, the theft of land, resources. When we look at this transatlantic slave trade, right, that's what the U.S. used to build up this so-called country, this internal colony. And so we see that, that's how our struggles are linked, right, through this common enemy of U.S. imperialism, right, of U.S. colonialism. And so, right, through all these different causes, right, we can see that, like, none of these different issues are just, like, in isolation of each other, right? If the people want sovereignty, if the people want control over their land, their resources, right, we have to resist and we have to support each other in that resistance. And even, the sculpture itself, right, talking about like it's a mountain, right? It's an interruption of this flat, very flat landscape of Houston, right? The flattening, the leveling of Houston isn't something that just, it wasn't always like naturally like this, right? There were hills, there were valleys, there were more rivers. The bayou was bigger and more expansive, right? But what happened? What I'm saying? We see, again, tying it back to the port, tying it back to imperialism. We see that, this country and this nation would rather build a highway through a neighborhood so that it could transport, goods like the weapons coming from the port to a different city, as opposed to building up, infrastructure that would actually help people, buses, transportation, etc. So I digress. So that being said, right, because all these struggles are linked, in the fight for sovereignty, we have to, support a free Palestine. We have to fight for a free Palestine, free Sudan, free Congo, all the oppressed people of the world. We have to come together to fight our primary enemy, which is going to be U.S. imperialism. So, with that, I think I said enough. So, free Palestine and death to the IDF. That's it.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rachel. I am a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I actually met Mariela and Justin at a anti-war, or got connected to them through an anti-war protest a couple of weeks ago against the war in Venezuela. And as an artist myself, I really am grateful to be here. I'm glad to see an artist making a political statement with their work, because I think that's so important, especially on such a critical topic. When we hear the word sovereignty, we're often taught to think about really abstract things, right? Like flags or borders or even politicians. It's meant to feel really immaterial and like not really connected to our real lives. But really, sovereignty is much more than that, right? It's demanding. It's everything. And really, it should be everything for us as people. Sovereignty is about having the power to shape your own future. It means having control over the conditions of your life. It means dignity, safety, and the freedom to say no. No to exploitation, to domination, to being sacrificed for someone else's profit. This is something that the vast majority of us as working people in the United States have never experienced before. The only freedoms we have really here in the US are the freedom to go hungry, the freedom to go homeless, the freedom to go without access to our basic human needs. If you're working 2 or 3 jobs and still can't pay rent, if missing one paycheck means losing your housing, if debt follows you for decades, if food prices climb while our wages continue to stay the same, then our choices are already being made for us. Our labor is what keeps our society running, but survival always seems to feel so fragile. And that's no accident, right? When survival takes all of our energy every day, there's very little room left for imagination, for resistance, for building relationships and collective power. Sorry, I'm trying to get out of this one. When we talk about sovereignty as people living in the United States, the belly of the beast, we need to also be honest that the US acts as a global policeman, right? Lecturing the world about freedom and democracy, and its own people are denied the right to live a dignified life. That same system of capitalism that prioritizes profits for the few over the needs of the many is used to dominate us at home and abroad. And that brings me, I want to talk about the Caribbean and Latin America a little bit. I'm glad that it was spoken about already. My family's from Haiti. January 1st marks Haitian Independence Day, which is the anniversary of the first successful slave rebellion in world history. Haiti was the first free Black republic in the world, and today it's considered the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Why, would you ask? Not because the Haitian people are incapable or incompetent, like the media wants us to believe, but because the Western elite, the United States, France, etc., have sought to keep the people of Haiti down since winning their freedom. And the same goes for most of the Caribbean, right? For centuries, the Caribbean and Latin America, has been treated not as a collection of sovereign nations, as it really is, but as a resource zone, something to be extracted from, controlled, and disciplined. And who sees the benefit of all that extraction? Definitely not the people of the Caribbean. It's the US executives on Wall Street and in our White House. And when Caribbean and Latin American nations try to chart their independent paths outside of this framework of freedom and domination, not freedom, they're punished. When they prioritize social spending, they're absolutely demonized. When they resist privatization, they're labeled unstable or stupid. When they demand reparations or fair trade, they're invaded or occupied. The entire playbook is happening before our eyes with Venezuela right now. Rather than meeting people's needs here at home, the US is escalating towards another war against the people of Venezuela. And as they do, the government paints a narrative to justify its actions. We're helping them with democracy or weapons of mass destruction, if anyone was there when they used that same lie to invade Iraq. This time it's about drugs. But the real reason has never been about anything like that, The US is escalating toward war and threatening millions of lives for oil and for US corporate interests. And not only that, but because Venezuela has sought to chart an independent path outside of the framework of US control over. And maybe you're asking, well, why should I care? I would assume that everybody cares because we're at an exhibit called Sovereignty, but because we should care because this impacts all of us. War is in no one's interest but the pockets of the wealthy executives that are just gonna get lined even more than they already are, The money spent destabilizing other nations is the same money that we're told doesn't exist for housing, doesn't exist for healthcare, or education, or anything that we actually need or would be useful to our lives. So while we're told to think that we as working class people are somehow gonna get more power by the US, destroying the sovereignty of nations around the world, the same people who are feeding us that lie that we have something to gain from war are the people who are doing everything in their power to strip us of our rights to everything that we need, to strip us of our sovereignty too. Sovereignty cannot exist in a system that prioritizes profit over people. You can't have real freedom when housing is a commodity, when healthcare is absolutely a business, food is controlled by corporations, and survival is something we think about literally every single day. So that brings me to the point of, well, what are we supposed to do? And I want to be clear in my assertion. I think Assata Shakur was quoted earlier, but I believe that, as Assata said, it's our duty to fight for our freedom. The system of exploitation and oppression that we live under cannot and will not last forever. Our people, we're seeing it now, all across the country are standing up against the egregious conditions that we're experiencing to say enough is enough. And so, I mentioned I'm a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm a socialist because socialism is about building a future that prioritizes needs and well-being of people and the planet, not profits for a tiny handful of elites. It's about giving power to the people who actually make society run and not to the people who just leech off the rest of us and do absolutely nothing. Only then can we really put sovereignty into practice. And we all have a role to play with that, whether we're artists, whether we're parents, workers, whatever. It'll really take all of us. We need to choose a side, and I really congratulate Mariela for choosing a side, truly, with this exhibit. So.